Hello and welcome to my spoiler review for Wicked, a movie that I loved from the very first frame. Yes, as we've discussed before, it's very important for a movie's success with how it starts and even more so with how it ends, because that's the feeling that the audience leaves the theater with. But the opening is important too, because it sets the tone for the rest of the film and it buys you a lot of goodwill up front. So if you falter a little here and there as the movie goes on, people are still like, but that opening was so good. And Jon Chu delivered one heck of an opening and an ending with Wicked. Oh my goodness. I wasn't sure what to expect from this movie because again, I'd never seen the Broadway show, and the ad campaign, while it seemed very fun, the movie also seemed a little flippant. I had no idea the depths of the commentary that I would see. But after a very fun vintage Universal logo with hints of pink, I was like, that's beautiful. The screen went dark. And I believe we hear Fiyero. It happened so quickly. But in Dolby sound, by the way, it came out right in off to the side behind me. It was so cool. And I think he called out frantically, "The Wicked Witch is dead." That's incredible. Melted. And as frantic voices continue, you were like, what's happening? What's happening? We went across the stone floor. Clearly, the witch's lair, as we see in the 1939 film, but obviously even cooler. But then you see a window and you see Elphaba's hat sitting in a puddle of water. Oh my gosh. And then right from behind you, they're forcing a lot of people to watch this movie in 3D. Were you stuck watching it in 3D? But I bet a lot of these sequences are pretty awesome in 3D. But anyway, all of the winged monkeys come rushing from behind past you and they break out the window. And they're either freaking out or they're like, we're gonna get revenge for Elphaba, for the boss. And then as they fly out over Oz, oh, it was amazing. It was like the Avatar ride at Animal Kingdom. So they're going all over Oz and there's a rainbow, but also there's like, what's happening? What's happening? And there's like this incredible drum beat going. You're just like, oh, wow. It was amazing. I was like, wow, this movie is so extra. I love it. So that to me, like right out of the gate, even when sometimes I didn't love what I wasn't blown away by everything, but I was always like, man, this movie had such a good start. I know it's going to get back to that point. And it did, particularly with the ending. I'm in absolute awe of Elphaba's power. Who doesn't imagine sometimes that kind of power runs through them? You're like, yeah. And so that was great. Although, by the way, in her I Want song in the beginning, when she says she has a premonition of being celebrated someday, I was like, oh man, they're celebrating your death, girl. Oh, I actually said out loud, oh boy, I felt so bad for her. But really, that she becomes, in this first part, such an incredible force of not just power, but will. That's an important part of it, will. And that it seems Glinda, by the way, this I absolutely adore. Who knew this movie, again, was so sophisticated? Glinda will get her wish. She will become a famous witch, but it's not because she has a lot of talent as a witch. It's because the wizard and Madame Morrible will need a figurehead to counter Elphaba. Oh, that was amazing. The way they started to move towards her, even at the end, they were like, oh, we're going to need our own witch. There's one. And she already saw all this, so how can we keep her quiet? I know. We can promise to put her in our cabinet. But that was just really amazing. And the fact that Glinda would take the offer. I love it. So complex and interesting. So yes, Elphaba's talent is that, her power is her talent. She actually has legitimate talent. But sure enough, that popular song, it just seems like a fun trifle. But it is such an important song because what does Glinda's power end up being? That she's popular. That is amazing, and that she knows how to play the game and she's willing to play the game, while Elphaba rails against it. That is just amazing to me. And again, that makes their song at the end where they're like, hope it works out for you. Well, I hope it works out for you. They both think the other one's making such a horrible choice. I just think that's, again, as I said in my non-spoiler review, I think it's not going to go particularly well for either one of them. I kind of might have cheated. I'm so excited to see what happens, and I might have looked a little bit at what happens in part 2. That's the problem with having to wait for a part 2. But I'm so excited to see it unfold. And obviously they add so much nuance to this film that I'm sure part 2 will have so much more going on. But anyway, back to the importance of an incredible opening and ending. Defying Gravity, the big song at the end, is of course an incredible song, right? It's the Broadway show's signature song. It's what inspired Frozen's Let It Go, and both of them are total bangers. But while I liked the song, for me, what made the end sequence so incredible was what happened during it. It's very carefully and effectively choreographed. I mean, Jon Chu, he took it's even better than Frozen, I think. Frozen's very nice while she's walking out into the snow and makes a castle for herself. But the way that Jon Chu just keeps racking up the tension and the awesomeness was just so incredible. So first, Elphaba grasps a twisted, gnarled old broom, embracing her otherness. It reminded me of an Agatha All Along, where they were like, we don't want anything to do with brooms, but then they embraced it. So that was great. And then she got into position to take off. When she swirled her cape behind her, it was like Superman getting ready to take off. You're like, oh, this is going to be good. But at first, she just jumps across the large tower. She kind of gets that little she's able to hang in the air a little bit longer like she does in the very beginning when she's running through that field. Also, a little Superman-y, right? He started to learn to fly. He was doing a couple like long jumps. But then she has to escape. So much like her winged monkeys in the beginning of the movie, she crashes through the window, but she doesn't take off. It's a leap of faith. And at first it does not go well. She's plummeting towards the earth. Thank goodness that tower was so high up. And, as she falls, she sees her reflection in the wizard's palace, and she sees her younger self. And I think she's not only reminded of everything that she's gone through, but also her childhood. She was very spirited as a child, as we saw. She persevered. And I think she wanted to honor that child and do right by that child. And also, it's just you, Elphaba. You're just going to have to take care of yourself, like you always have. And so, she reached for the broom, to borrow from another famous Broadway show, right? Reach for the broom, reach for the broom, the broom, she reached for the broom. That's my best off-the-cuff Chicago impression. But yeah, she reached for that broom. And then she took off. Now, this shot is, of course, incredible. And it was so cool to see the flying monkeys chasing her. Again, that must look pretty great in 3D. I wonder how they end up becoming friends. I was like, you guys are going to laugh about this. But to me, the most amazing shot was at the very end when she shot off across Oz in a straight line, going at such speed that with her cape whipping behind her. If you've ever driven in a convertible, you know how this stuff really can get messed up, like your hair or a scarf. But it's like, and it was going so fast that it looked like smoke behind her, which of course is a callback to the 1939 film as the Wicked Witch of the West would leave a trail of smoke. But here they say it's actually her ridiculously long cape. Edna Mode, I'm not sure how, I think Edna Mode would be torn. She'd be like, the practicality of that is absolutely ridiculous. But it's so freaking cool, and you seem to be able to make it work. Let's go with it, darling. I loved it. I will never forget the opening and the ending of this movie. They are a big part of why I want to see the film again. And I think that, they are so good, they should be taught in film school for incredible openings and endings of a movie. They're that good. Now, speaking of the wizard, I don't know why the movie tries to make it a secret that he's Elphaba's true father, because while they don't show you his face, I'm like, Jeff Goldblum has such a distinct cadence, even when he's singing, that I heard him clearly as the male part of that duet. So I'm like, oh, that's the wizard. And I loved that Elphaba, therefore, is green, because the wizard, of course, goes on to build the Emerald City. It's very clever and interesting to me. I'm excited to find out, I think that it's only glossed over from what I could see in the Broadway musical, but I wonder if the movie, like the novel, maybe digs a little deeper and gives a little bit more meaning to that. I'm very excited to see that explored in part 2. Also, I believe in the book and the musical, he doesn't know that Elphaba is his daughter, but here he seemed to. I got that feeling because he references being a parent so much. He was like, oh, I'm a parent. Well, I feel like he just, I don't know. He seemed to be dropping lots of hints. I was like, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I love Wicked's references to the 1939 film and the original story, the novel. They are all very clever, yet not overly done. which I think makes them therefore all the more effective. They're very rewarding. That's interesting to me. One of the things that have really helped Jack Schaefer's projects, which I think clearly there's a parallel between these, Agatha All Along drew on The Wizard of Oz itself. But there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of depth. There's things that they allow you to put together yourself. And so I think that makes the film even more interactive in a way. I really like that. It's not passive. You're like, ooh, what's the mystery? So I like seeing the wizard in the Emerald City, the building of the yellow brick road. Much like Rome, the wizard wants all roads to lead to him. I thought that was fantastic. It was silly when they were like, what color should we make it? And we're all like, yellow, yellow. But it was fun. It was fun. I'm excited to see it being built. His hot air balloon, which is how he got to Oz as a carnival con man. I thought it was great to see that. And of course, is at the very end of the 1939 movie. I liked the Wizard's model of Oz, too. It reminded me so much of Walt Disney's models over the years, promising a bright future that often proves to be too good to be true. I mean, sometimes it looks like the model, but when Disney would, I think it reminds me in particular, if you're a Disney fan and you've been to the Magic Kingdom, if you go on the People Mover in Tomorrowland, they show you Walt's City of Tomorrow, which he originally had planned Epcot to be, a place where people actually worked and lived. It's an incredible model, and I love seeing it. And it's, it never came close to existing. And so for some reason, this model reminded me of that. And I liked his musical number, right? Where he went through the gauze sky. I was like, hey, Rio just did that on Agatha All Along. But then when he did that silhouette kind of dance number and he bounced the moon around, I mean, it was charming. Not only how he sees himself, but how he wants others to see himself, right? Something else I loved was when Madame Morrible showed her true allegiance to the wizard. And like visually fell into step with him. That was incredible. She just kind of was like, yes, I'm with him. And you're like, oh, you guys look so good together. I can't even be that angry about it. I mean, it was amazing. So that Elphaba has not one enemy, but two. Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh are such nice people in real life, but I have to say, they serve excellent villain here, particularly Yeoh, with her elegance and poise. Speaking of Disney, I think Jon Chu is borrowing very heavily from Disney here, which is interesting to me. Universal's really looking over Disney's shoulder. They're making live action adaptations. They're doing their own, this is almost to some degree, feels like a live action adaptation. But Michelle Yeoh to me is giving Disney villain. Like when she went to tell the flying monkeys that Elphaba was the one they should be angry with for their new wings. We'll talk about that. But when she walked out there and she was like, attention. And I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. I love that. Now, for those of you wondering about the subplot with talking animals, don't forget about the Cowardly Lion. This is actually incredibly clever. I wish they'd actually made that even more clear, because I think at first some people aren't going to understand why this is there. The role, of course, is famously depicted in the 1939 film and many productions after that as a man in a lion suit. But the illustrations for the original novel, which adorned Billy's room in Agatha All Along, feature a literal talking lion. Oh my goodness. And who does Elphaba rescue at Shiz University? A lion cub. I know some of you have picked up on that already. I think it's also, of course, from the musical, but I think they should have made that a little bit more clear when they presented him. They should have been like, look at this lion cub, right? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, it's just really great. I like the subplot also because, as always, some people might say, well, hey, they're not coming for me. But the answer to that is always, they're not coming for you yet. It's always shocking to me that people don't realize this. If they'll come for someone, eventually they'll come for everyone. And I think it was truly terrifying here that they were willing to take away someone's speech, the animal's speech, literally their voice. But, metaphorically, I think that's what they're saying as well. But also to revert them to their base qualities. As is being done with the animals. So you might think, well, they're just going back to being animals, right? But one could argue that that is a fate that threatens a number of human groups as well. Wanting to go back to the stereotype, the assumption of what they are instead of what they could be. I thought that was really terrifying. When they were saying, oh yes, when the professor, Dr. Dillamont or whatever, when he said something and he suddenly kind of turned into a goat, when he was talking, I thought that was one of the most terrifying things I ever saw. I was like, oh man, that was really scary. As for references to the Broadway show, I couldn't pick up on all of them, obviously, because I haven't seen the Broadway show. But I know who Idina Menzel and Kristin Chenoweth are. So my audience applauded when they showed up, and so did I, because you got to respect the OGs. So they showed up portraying a singing or a musical theater group at the Emerald City who are presenting the origins of the Grimmerie, a magic spell book created by beings in Oz at a time when there was magic. No one has been able to read the book until the wizard showed up and pretended to be able to read it. Ever the con artist, passing off technology and sleight of hand tricks as real magic. Well, it turns out Elphaba is the only one who can actually read it. And I looked ahead a little bit to part 2, so I know why she can read it, but I'll refrain from ruining that. But I liked how they tested her. And they were like, this monkey guard really likes birds. He's a fan of birds. I don't know why the monkey guard wasn't like, I've never looked at a bird in my life. What are you talking about? But I guess, the wizard is a dictator. So they actually did not have any interest in getting wings. But the wizard, tricked Elphaba into giving them that. And also he said, they'll make excellent spies, or, an aerial force, which of course has always been historically the key to military strength and supremacy. So I was like, wow, they're actually even putting military facts and things into Wicked. But that was just such an amazing sequence. And by the way, there have been so many magic books, like with Harry Potter and stuff. The fact that they managed to make the Grimmerie still unique to this movie, was really impressive. I was like, oh wow, it's some crazy triangle book or whatever. And the way it kind of came to life, I was like, why is it always the same spell? I don't know. I think they could do a little bit more at the Grimmerie. It was crazy, but I still liked it, and it seemed unique to Wicked. But the way, again, Elphaba was so expertly manipulated, but then her realizing with her famous line that the wizard has no real power. That was great. The man she'd idolized because she thought that he was powerful like her. That was just incredible. And then also the way Madame Morrible was able to turn the monkeys against her, Elphaba, by saying it was Elphaba it was her idea to deform them. Those monkeys were mad, boy. They were super upset. But again, as I said, it's a crazy story. So often in fantasy stories, there are a lot of witches everywhere. But in the original Wizard of Oz novel, there were only 4, right? For each direction, east, west, north, and south. Then in the 1939 movie, in the actual film, there were only 2, a good witch and a bad witch. But in this musical, I like this even better. There's actually only one true witch. And Glinda, while she has a little power, Madame Morrible has a little bit of power too. But Glinda, she's just really another sleight of hand, a propaganda tool as an alternative to Elphaba that helps define Elphaba as evil. Because if there's a good witch, then therefore that means there must be a bad witch. And, the wizard and Madame Morrible are clearly going to present Glinda as the good witch. So it's also, this movie's inadvertently a lot about the importance of branding. If only there was a PR firm in Oz that Elphaba could have hired. All right, so as I said, outside of the songs Popular and Defying Gravity, I really love those songs. And those are, I believe, the most famous songs from the musical. Dancing Through Life is okay, but largely because I thought the visuals were interesting. But I felt the songs here were, as I said in my non-spoiler review, Broadway generic. I'm sorry, but that's how I felt. But the visuals for the musical numbers were really captivating, and so I still managed to enjoy them quite a bit. To be honest, my favorite scenes all took place outside of Shiz University, although I also liked Glinda's room, but we'll talk about that. Which we see by the way, with Shiz University, when Elphaba accidentally breaks that stone emblem of the wizard, the university we can see was clearly founded by animals, and that's something that's being hidden. I'm surprised they didn't nobody pointed that out a little bit more. But anyway, I loved seeing Oz. The Oz Dust Ballroom was pretty nice. I was like, that's a pretty good party. Nobody apparently got carded. I guess they were all in college, but still. The Emerald City, which I thought had really strong fantasy vibes, and it felt like the source material. It reminded me of the 1939 film, but also it just radiated grandeur, right? You felt like something epic was happening when you were there. Also, it reminded me a little bit, as I said in my non-spoiler review, of a theme park. I was like, oh, build it, Universal, build it! Because it reminded me a little bit of the Harry Potter lands they've been building. I also liked Glinda and Elphaba's dorm room, as I said, as it had a lot of personality, although the way it ended up being split down the middle, a little bit like the dorm room on Wednesday, and perhaps that was influenced by Wicked. But Shiz University itself, while stunning, a very incredible, like a beautiful, incredible set, it felt more like an elaborate theme park or Las Vegas hotel, I must say. Maybe someday it will be. But that's what it felt like to me. I felt that also in the Shiz University scenes, the movie became the most message heavy. To me, Shiz University wore its message on its sleeves and pant legs of its uniform. You know what those uniforms reminded me of? They reminded me of the SNL sketch Woke Jeans. Still hilarious to this day. But that's kind of what those uniforms reminded me of. And I think they pulled focus from the students themselves. Speaking of SNL, by the way, I'm glad they cast Bowen Yang, not only because I'm a big fan, but the movie needed him because he brings a lot with him to the role. Because the role was so small and not particularly well written, so he stands out by force of personality. I mean, did you notice any other students really? Not really. So he was great, thanks to the brilliant work he's already done on SNL. But the outside, so I didn't like the Shiz University costumes, but outside of those costumes, the rest of the costumes in the film are outstanding. And there's actually a really fantastic behind the scenes look at how the costumes were done with an interview with costume designer Paul Tazewell. I think Tazewell has the Oscar locked. I would be really surprised if he didn't win it. All of these stunning and elaborate costumes, hundreds of them, were all designed and made from scratch. That is such a feat. It's just really amazing. Of course, we know that Ariana Grande's Glinda was going to look great. And she does. She really does. But I will say they could have just gone Barbie with her. But Barbie costumes, by the way, in that movie had a simplicity to them because those echoed doll clothes, which of course are simply made because they're for children. But with Wicked, the costumes are incredibly detailed. I think not just for film close-ups, but to make the world seem all the more real. And therefore, and I think it's effective. I think it does make the world seem more real. And also, the Tazewell is able to make different parts of Oz feel distinct through costume. Like you could tell when you were in the Emerald City. You can tell when you were in Munchkin Land, Shiz University, even Fiyero's Winky Prince. There was a distinct look to how he was dressed. And yet still all clearly part of the same world. They were different, but yet the same. And that is also really impressive that Tazewell was able to do that. But I think most impressive of all is that while Cynthia Erivo looks very much like the Wicked Witch of the West, Tazewell is able to convey that while still giving her tremendous flair and dignity. She has the hat, the boots, the broom, the cape, the old world high collars and shoulders. I liked the shoulder pad joke. That was funny. But she not only looks amazing thanks to Tazewell, but Erivo wears the heck out of those costumes. I mean, just really, really incredible. And the glasses, wow, those are just incredible. So cool that Jon Chu even wore a pair to the premiere. I just thought they were fantastic. It's rare that costume design overshadows production design. Usually it complements it and is an extension of the production design. But here I felt the real star was the costumes. And that's just really incredible. You should watch that short. Tazewell talks about how he's done The Wiz. And I like that there was references to that. It was just really, I mean, wow. It just shows, the craftsmanship and professionalism and experience, how much those all factor into really good work. So finally, the performances. I've seen some talk on social media about who else was considered for the 2 lead roles, as they've been trying to make Wicked for quite some time. But to me, Erivo and Grande have truly become Elphaba and Glinda. And I can't imagine any other actresses in the role. Although, I thought it was funny when they paired up with Chenoweth and Menzel. Idina Menzel, particularly Chenoweth, because she was really channeling a little bit of Glinda there, and she was kind of smacking around Ariana Grande. I thought that was really great. It's funny, they're almost like Captain America and Tony Stark. I had to do it. That's where my mind goes. They really reminded me of that, because not only because of, the way they were going, they're friends, but also that they were fighting, but in terms of iconicness. So on that note, to have a huge blockbuster pass the Bechdel test so strongly is an amazing accomplishment. It is very rare to get 1 strong female role, much less 2, in a film of this size. Like, I don't think Marvel or DC would ever make a Captain America and Tony Stark kind of Civil War movie with 2 women going up against each other. I wish they would, but this is just really, really amazing. Here's fingers crossed for Florence Pugh and Thunderbolts. All right, but again, it's just, she's just 1, right? So Hollywood seems to be more impressed with Grande out of the gate. I saw one Hollywood bigwig apparently say that she was the new Barbra Streisand. I thought that was interesting. I can see, at first I was like, they're so different. But then I thought of Funny Girl, which was Streisand's own breakout role in Hollywood, reprising the role she'd played on the stage. But when you think of Funny Girl, I'm like, yeah, maybe that is a good correlation. That would be great for Ariana Grande. Although Erivo has just signed a development deal with Universal. So it looks like there might be a bright future for both of them in film. I also think they're probably both going to get nominated for an Oscar. I think almost for sure. The only casting that I don't like in the film is Jonathan Bailey. I'm sorry, Jonathan Bailey fans, but I would be surprised if even you could defend him here. He's weak here. Maybe he'll be better in part 2. But right now, I think he comes off as a Gaston ripoff. Although, he wrote into the movie like Prince Philip, which I loved because Sleeping Beauty is my favorite Disney princess movie. And I also laughed out loud when he did that flying dismount from his horse. That was really funny. But I found his singing voice underwhelming, and I didn't think that he had particularly strong chemistry with either actress. I just didn't like him in the role. I think they could have done better. I didn't like Ethan Slater very much either, by the way. Although I felt what was going on also with his character was so mean. It's in the movie, it's in the Broadway play, so a musical, so it goes in the movie. But that is some real Mean Girls stuff. I was like, I think his character should be ashamed of what he's doing to Elphaba's sister himself. It's not totally Glinda's fault. He's letting that happen. I was like, ooh, this is bad. But anyway, it did take me out of the movie a little bit whenever we saw him because I was like, because, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's a mini scandal with him and Grande. And so, that just kind of took me a little bit out of the movie whenever I saw him. But thankfully, Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Michelle Yeoh, and Jeff Goldblum are all just so fantastic that they carry the film. And Jon Chu, I think, also deserves a lot of credit. We'll see how if the messaging ends up hurting the film at all at the box office. We'll see. It might take off like such a rocket opening weekend. It would be hard to slow it down. Here's hoping. All right, so that's my spoiler review for Wicked. Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.